The morning of the investor review, she smiled at me a little too brightly, as if she already owned my future. By noon, my login history showed an unfamiliar device had opened my master file. And by evening, in a glass conference room full of executives, the wrong version of my plan would light up the screen. The office always smelled faintly of burnt espresso and ambition on investor review days. Screens glowed earlier than usual, keyboards clattered with a nervous rhythm, and even the air conditioning seemed to hum in a higher key. I arrived before sunrise, balancing a paper cup in one hand and the weight of 3 sleepless nights in the other. My proposal, Project Helix, sat in a secured folder on the internal drive, polished until every comma felt intentional. I had built it line by line, forecasting growth curves like someone reading constellations. If it worked, it would shift our division's trajectory. If it failed, I would be the one quietly archived. She was already there. Marina leaned against the glass wall of conference room B, scrolling through her phone with the calm of someone who didn't doubt her place in the room. When she saw me, her smile bloomed, too warm, too deliberate. "Big day," she said lightly. "Big week," I replied, matching her tone. Her gaze lingered half a second longer than necessary. Then she looked away. That half-second sat with me. Marina and I had started the same month. Same onboarding, same polite HR slides about compliance, and the infamous non-solicit Section 8 clause we all signed with nervous laughs. But where I stayed late refining spreadsheets, she floated through meetings collecting allies like business cards. She knew which vice president preferred flattery disguised as strategy. She knew when to nod and when to stay silent. And lately, she had been asking too many questions about Helix. "Are you including the new cost absorption model?" she'd asked 2 days earlier, casually, as if curiosity were harmless. "I'm refining it," I'd said, mind sharing the draft, just to align messaging. Align messaging. The phrase had tasted metallic. I never sent it. Instead, I began noticing things. Her presence near my desk when I stepped away. Her habit of glancing at my screen reflection in the window behind me. Once, I returned from a call to find my mouse slightly shifted. A millimeter, not enough for proof, just enough for doubt. Paranoia, I told myself. Then, yesterday afternoon, an email notification flickered on my phone. Unusual login detected. Same network, different device. My pulse slowed instead of quickening. That was the moment everything became very clear. I didn't confront her. I didn't storm into HR. I didn't accuse. Accusations without evidence are confetti in a hurricane. Instead, I opened my project folder and created a copy. Helix_final_V12. Then another Helix_final_V12_client. And finally, one more. Helix_final_V12_working. The real file, the one with the predictive model refined down to decimal precision, I saved offline and uploaded through the version-controlled portal our CTO insisted we use. The system automatically stamped it with time, user ID, and device signature. Clean, traceable, immutable. The version on the shared drive, I adjusted the revenue timeline, subtly. I replaced a data source with a placeholder. Nothing dramatic, just enough to unravel under scrutiny. A decoy that looked confident at a glance, but would crumble under executive questioning. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the screen. Was I overreacting? My login alert glowed in my inbox like a quiet witness. At 6:12 p.m., when most of the office had emptied, I walked past Marina's desk. She was packing up. "Staying late?" she asked. "Always," I smiled. Her eyes flicked toward my computer behind me. Just a flicker. The next morning, investor review day, she brought pastries, blueberry for the CFO, almond for the head of strategy, chocolate for me. A peace offering or a victory lap? As we gathered in conference room A, sunlight sliced across the polished table like a blade. The partners filed in, suits crisp, expressions sharper. The projector blinked to life. Marina volunteered to present first. "I'll keep it brief," she said smoothly. "I know we're tight on time." Tight on time. I watched her plug in her laptop. On the screen appeared a familiar title slide. Project Helix, my font, my color palette, my tagline. My stomach did not drop. It settled. She had done it. The introduction flowed confidently from her lips, almost word for word from my executive summary. She described the market gap. She outlined the scalability arc. She even used the metaphor about turning friction into fuel. My metaphor. No one interrupted. She advanced to the financial projection slide. There it was, the decoy model. For a fraction of a second, I felt a flicker of guilt. Then the CFO leaned forward. "Can you explain the discrepancy between Q3 and Q4 margins?" he asked. Marina blinked. "It's a seasonal adjustment," she said quickly. "Based on what data source?" the head of strategy added. She clicked to the appendix. The placeholder reference glowed like a silent alarm. Her confidence thinned, just slightly. I folded my hands in my lap. This wasn't revenge. This was documentation. She tried to pivot. "The working model includes refinements." "Which working model?" the CFO asked. Silence hovered, delicate as glass. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A system notification. Helix_final_V12_client accessed via portal. Timestamp verified. Someone from IT had opened it for display on the central system. Marina's version flickered on the projector as the tech team synced files. And then, the screen changed. A new slide appeared. Project Helix, same title, different timestamp. My user ID, room log record visible in the footer. The original model. A whisper traveled around the table. Marina turned toward the screen slowly, as if motion itself had weight. And in that suspended second, I realized something important. This was no longer about credit. It was about authorship. The head of strategy cleared his throat. "Who altered the file?" The question didn't sound loud, but it echoed. And if you think that was the moment everything snapped into place, you haven't seen what comes next. Silence in a glass conference room has texture. It presses against your ribs, it sharpens the air, it makes even the hum of the projector feel accusatory. "Who altered the file?" the head of strategy repeated, slower this time. Marina's posture shifted by a fraction, a micro adjustment, shoulders back, chin lifted, as if confidence were something you could physically reattach. "I updated it last night," she said, "to reflect alignment feedback." Alignment feedback. The phrase landed flat. The CTO, who had been quietly observing, leaned forward and tapped his tablet. The portal log shows Helix_final_V12_client uploaded 3 days ago from Ava's credentials. No edits since. The shared drive version was modified yesterday at 6:18 p.m. Different device. Different device. My coffee had long gone cold in my hands, but I didn't move. Marina blinked again. "We collaborate. It's possible." "Collaboration leaves comments," the CFO interrupted gently. "Not overwritten formulas." A faint pulse flickered at her temple. I could feel the emotional wave rising inside me. Anger first, sharp and metallic. She had rehearsed my words. She had practiced my pauses. She had stepped into the room expecting applause. But anger is loud, and loud rarely wins in rooms like this. So I let it pass. "I'd like to clarify something," I said evenly. All eyes shifted. The room seemed to contract. I received an unusual login alert yesterday, I continued. Same network, new device. I secured the original version through the portal, specifically because of investor review protocol. Protocol. The word carried weight. The CFO nodded. Standard practice? Marina turned toward me fully now. Are you implying? I'm stating timestamps, I replied, calm as still water. The CTO projected the access log onto the secondary screen. Rows of digital footprints appeared. User IDs, device signatures, exact times down to the second. It was clinical, unemotional, and devastating. 6:12 p.m., shared drive file accessed. 6:18 p.m., shared drive file modified. 6:21 p.m. Shared drive file saved under same name. The device ID didn't match mine. It did match Marina's assigned laptop. The room inhaled as one organism. She opened her mouth, then closed it. I was reviewing, without notifying the file owner, the head of strategy asked. Under non-solicit Section 8 and internal authorship policy, the legal advisor added quietly from the far end of the table. Material alterations without attribution constitute a breach. Non-solicit Section 8 had always sounded abstract during onboarding, a clause you skim and forget. Now it felt like a spotlight. My heart hammered, but my voice stayed level. I didn't authorize edits. There it was, not an accusation, a fact. Marina's composure began to fracture, not dramatically, not theatrically. Just small fissures. Her hands tightened around the remote. I was strengthening the projection. The client expects bold numbers. The client expects defensible numbers, the CFO corrected. Another silence. But this one had shifted direction. The executives weren't looking at me with suspicion anymore. They were studying her. Hope rose quietly in my chest. Fragile, cautious. Not triumph. Not yet. The head of strategy turned back to the main screen where my original model glowed with clean margins and referenced data sources. Walk us through your assumptions, he said. To me. The invitation felt heavier than applause. I stood. My legs didn't tremble, though they had every reason to. I moved to the front of the room, feeling the warmth of the projector against my sleeve. As outlined in the portal submission, I began, the Q3 to Q4 shift reflects vendor renegotiation already in draft. Appendix C details the correspondence. Click. Emails appeared, real ones, documented. The CFO nodded slowly. With respect to scalability, I continued, the absorption model accounts for phased onboarding rather than aggressive expansion. It protects EBITDA stability. I saw it then, the shift in posture around the table. Pens stopped tapping, brows unfurrowed, the kind of attention that signals belief. Behind me, Marina sat very still. I didn't look at her, I didn't need to. By the time I reached the final slide, the energy in the room had changed entirely. What began as tension now felt like controlled momentum. The head of strategy exchanged a glance with the CFO. This is the version we'll move forward with, he said. The sentence landed like quiet thunder. Relief surged through me. But it wasn't clean. It carried exhaustion, disbelief, something almost like grief. Trust, once cracked, never fits the same way again. Then, the legal advisor spoke again, gently but firmly. We'll need IT to conduct a brief audit of the access logs. Standard procedure? Standard procedure. The phrase hovered between us. Marina's gaze flicked toward me, sharp, searching, perhaps hoping for eye contact that would signal mercy or hesitation. I kept my expression neutral. This was no longer personal. It was procedural. As the meeting adjourned, executives filtered out in low conversation. A few paused to shake my hand. Strong work, the CFO murmured. Very thorough. Thorough. In the hallway, Marina caught up to me. "You set me up," she hissed under her breath. The words struck, but I didn't flinch. "I protected my work," I said quietly. Her jaw tightened. "This isn't over." For a heartbeat, the old fear tried to surface. The fear of retaliation, of whispers, of reputation warfare. But something steadier replaced it. "It doesn't need to be," I replied. She walked away first. Back at my desk, my inbox was already filling. Requests for follow-up materials, calendar holds, a meeting invite titled Helix Implementation, Lead, Ava, Lead. I exhaled slowly. Then another notification appeared. Subject, IT audit, preliminary findings. I stared at it. The emotional wave crested again. This time not anger, not hope, anticipation. Because audits don't just confirm what you know. They reveal what you don't. And what the logs would uncover about that 6:12 p.m. login would change more than a single presentation. If you think the presentation was the real turning point, wait until you see what the audit exposes. If you've ever had someone try to take credit for your work, tell me, would you have handled it the same way? Should I have confronted her earlier, or was quiet documentation the smarter move? And, be honest, when the screen switched to the original file, did you expect it? The email from IT didn't arrive with drama. No flashing alerts, no urgent red flags. Just a subject line sitting quietly in my inbox like a sealed envelope on a courtroom desk. IT audit, preliminary findings. The office had returned to its usual rhythm, but something underneath it had shifted. Conversations dipped when I walked past, not in hostility, more like recalibration. News travels fast in glass buildings. I opened the email, a formal summary, neutral tone, technical language. The unauthorized access to the shared drive file originated from Marina's assigned device at 6:12 p.m. The system confirmed manual credential entry. No evidence of remote spoofing, no system malfunction, manual credential entry. Which meant she had logged in as me. My pulse didn't spike this time, it steadied. Below that, a detail I hadn't expected. At 6:09 p.m., there had been a failed login attempt from the same device. Failed. My mind rewound 3 days. At 5:58 p.m., I had stepped away from my desk to take a call from procurement. I remembered because the conversation had run longer than expected. When I returned, my chair had been angled slightly differently. I had blamed fatigue. 6:09 p.m. failed login. 6:12 p.m. successful access. She must have tried once, mistyped. Tried again. The implication wasn't emotional. It was procedural, intent. I leaned back in my chair and let the information settle. Across the aisle, Marina sat rigidly at her desk, staring at her monitor. She hadn't spoken to me since the hallway exchange. HR had requested she remain available pending review. The phrase sounded polite. It felt heavy. My calendar pinged. Meeting, compliance, and legal. 2 p.m. conference room C. The smallest room on the floor. Glass walls, frosted halfway up. I walked in exactly at 1:59. The legal advisor from the presentation sat at the table, along with HR and the CTO. Marina arrived seconds later. Her lipstick was precise, her posture immaculate. If appearances were armor, she was fully suited. We took opposite sides of the table. The HR director began gently. This is a fact-finding conversation. Fact-finding, language matters in rooms like this. The CTO projected the access logs again. Clean rows, unforgiving timestamps. Marina, HR asked, can you explain the login sequence? She inhaled carefully. Ava and I collaborate frequently. She has shared drafts before. I assumed access was permissible. I kept my gaze level. That wasn't true, and the room knew it. The system shows credential entry, the CTO said. Not shared folder permissions. A pause. Then Marina pivoted. I was under pressure, she said, softer now. The investor review is competitive. We're measured individually. I believed the revised projections strengthened the proposal. Strengthened? The legal advisor folded his hands. Strength is not the issue. Authorization is. The words hung in the air like a gavel that hadn't struck yet. For a moment, brief but real, I felt a flicker of empathy. Ambition can twist. Fear of being overlooked can erode judgment. I understood the pressure, but understanding is not excusing. I did not grant access, I said quietly. No embellishment, no dramatics, just truth. The HR director nodded and made a note. Then came the part no one likes. Under company policy and the signed non-solicit Section 8 agreement, legal continued, unauthorized access and modification of proprietary work may constitute a breach of contract. May constitute. The language remained careful, controlled. Marina's composure cracked, not visibly to anyone who didn't know what to look for. But I saw it, the slightest tremor in her jaw. This will go on my record? She asked. HR met her gaze. We are conducting a full review. Full review. The phrase felt final, without being explicit. The meeting ended without raised voices, no accusations hurled across the table. Just documents, timestamps, and policy clauses doing what they were designed to do. As we stepped into the hallway, the late afternoon light poured through the windows, warm and indifferent. Marina didn't look at me this time. Instead, she said, almost to herself, "You could have just told me." I stopped. Told you what? I asked. That you knew. The honesty of it startled me. I didn't need to, I replied, because documentation speaks louder than confrontation. She walked away without another word. Back at my desk, I found a new email waiting. From the head of strategy. Subject, Helix Leadership Structure. My hand hesitated over the mouse for half a second. When I opened it, the message was brief. Effective immediately, I would lead the Helix implementation team. Direct reporting to strategy. Presentation to the client next month. Client next month. The opportunity expanded in front of me like a door opening quietly. But beneath that opportunity was something heavier, a ripple. Reputation doesn't shift in a single meeting. It moves in layers. Whispers become assumptions. Assumptions become narratives. By the end of the week, the audit would conclude, and whatever narrative formed around Marina would not be written by emotion. It would be written by record. I closed my laptop for the evening and looked out at the city lights beginning to glow. The glass reflected my own face back at me, tired, steady, altered. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't retaliated. I hadn't sent a single accusatory email. I had simply pressed save at the right time. But audits have a way of uncovering more than one file. And when the final report landed, it wouldn't just answer what happened at 6:12 p.m. It would answer how long it had been happening. The final audit report arrived on Friday at 8:03 a.m., stamped with the quiet authority of compliance letterhead. No dramatic subject line, no exclamation marks, just precision. IT audit concluded. I read it once quickly, then again slower. The findings confirmed the unauthorized access and modification of my file. But it didn't stop there. Over the previous 6 weeks, Marina's device had accessed 3 additional draft folders that were not shared with her. In 2 cases, the files were opened but not altered. In one, a proposal outline for a smaller client pitch had been copied into a temporary directory and later deleted. Deleted files are rarely truly deleted. The system had retained metadata, time, device, user, pattern. My breath left me slowly. This wasn't a single lapse in judgment, it was a habit. By 9 a.m., compliance had scheduled a final review session. Not a fact-finding conversation this time. A resolution meeting? Conference room D, the largest one. The symbolism wasn't subtle. When I walked in, the atmosphere felt different from earlier in the week. Less tense, more conclusive. Papers were stacked neatly, legal binders open. Decisions, it seemed, had already begun forming. Marina sat at the far end of the table. No pastries today. No polished smile, just a stillness that looked almost like exhaustion. HR began. The audit identified repeated unauthorized access to restricted project folders. The words were measured, almost gentle, but they carried weight. Marina didn't interrupt. Under the terms of your employment agreement and non-solicit Section 8, legal continued, this constitutes a material breach. Material breach. Corporate language has a way of sounding sterile even when it changes lives. Marina's hands were folded tightly in front of her. I never shared anything externally, she said. It stayed within the company. That is noted, HR replied. However, internal misappropriation remains a violation. I felt something unexpected then, not satisfaction, not vindication. Gravity. Ambition can make people reckless. Fear of stagnation can make them justify almost anything. But policies exist because intention is impossible to measure. Only action is. The CTO added one more detail. There is no evidence that Ava accessed your files in return. It was a small statement, but it mattered. Clean record. The room went quiet. HR slid a document across the table toward Marina. We are offering a separation agreement effective immediately. In light of your tenure, the company is prepared to provide transitional support contingent on signature. Separation agreement, not termination, not accusation. A structured exit. Marina stared at the paper. The confidence she once wore like a tailored jacket had loosened. She looked younger somehow, less certain. Is this because of her? She asked softly, not looking at me. HR shook her head. This is because of documented policy violations. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. The decision was not emotional. It was procedural. The logs had done the talking. After a long pause, Marina picked up the pen. The scratch of ink on paper sounded louder than any argument could have. When the meeting adjourned, she gathered her laptop slowly. No dramatic exit. No confrontation. Just a quiet departure down a hallway lined with glass. For a moment, I considered following her, not to gloat, not to comfort, just to say something human. But some endings don't require commentary. They require distance. By midday, her name had been removed from the internal directory. Her desk cleared by facilities, with quiet efficiency. The office moved on faster than anyone expects. Workflows resumed, Slack channels refreshed, but reputation doesn't disappear that cleanly. In the afternoon, the head of strategy stopped by my desk. Helix is officially greenlit, he said. Board approval pending, but they were impressed. Impressed, he paused, then added. You handled the situation professionally. That matters. Professionally, not brilliantly, not heroically, professionally. The compliment felt heavier than praise. As the week closed, calendar invites stacked for implementation meetings, vendor negotiations, client briefings, budget allocation sessions. Leadership, I realized, isn't loud. It's consistent. It's documented. It's resilient under pressure. Late that evening, I stood by the window again, city lights flickering below like distant code. The office reflected back at me, unchanged yet subtly rearranged. I had not exposed her publicly. I had not sent a single accusatory message. I had not weaponized gossip. I had simply trusted systems designed to protect authorship, and in doing so, something shifted, not just in my role, but in how I saw the room. Trust, once broken, doesn't return easily. But credibility, once proven, doesn't fade quickly either. Still, one question lingered beneath the surface like an unresolved chord. If she had succeeded that day, if the decoy hadn't existed, would anyone have questioned it? Or would my work have quietly changed hands without a timestamp to defend it? The answer to that question would shape how I built everything from this point forward. The first client meeting after everything happened felt strangely ordinary. No dramatic music, no whispered tension in hallways, just a calendar reminder blinking at 9:30 a.m., and a conference room waiting with a polished table and a pitcher of water catching the light. Yet nothing was ordinary. Project Helix no longer lived as a proposal. It had become execution. Timelines, milestones, accountability. My name now sat next to project lead in every shared document. The title looked official. It felt heavier than it appeared. The client joined via video first, faces in neat rectangles, curious and expectant. The board dialed in shortly after, the room filled with the soft shuffle of printed agendas and the quiet gravity of decision-makers settling in. I connected my laptop. For a fraction of a second, muscle memory flickered, the memory of a screen changing unexpectedly, the memory of a question echoing across glass walls. Who altered the file? But this time, when the slide appeared, there was no tension behind it. Just clean data, grounded assumptions, steady projections. I began. As I walked them through implementation phases, I noticed something subtle. No one interrupted to challenge ownership. No one asked who authored which model. The question of credibility had already been answered in a previous room. Reputation, I realized, travels faster than rumor when it's backed by record. Halfway through the meeting, the client's CFO leaned forward. What safeguards are in place for version control during rollout? A small smile almost formed. Every milestone file is uploaded through the secured portal, I said. Time-stamped, access restricted, with audit tracking enabled. A brief nod from the head of strategy. The client CFO smiled. Good. We've had issues elsewhere with overlapping authorship. Overlapping authorship. The phrase landed differently now. Not as threat, as validation. The meeting closed with conditional approval, pending final vendor confirmation. A handshake across screens, polite thank yous, the kind of ending that signals momentum without spectacle. When the room cleared, I stayed seated for a moment. Sunlight streamed through the glass, softer than it had been on investor review day. The office noise outside resumed its steady rhythm. Keyboards, distant laughter, the quiet choreography of people building something together. My phone buzzed. A message from HR, subject, policy update, access controls. The company was implementing enhanced multi-factor authentication and mandatory audit alerts for project leads. A subtle tightening of systems, not announced as a reaction, framed as optimization. But I knew. Sometimes change doesn't arrive with apology. It arrives with improved protocol. Later that afternoon, I passed the space that had once been Marina's desk. It was occupied now. A new analyst arranging framed photos, unaware of the quiet history embedded in the carpet. No plaque would mark what happened. No dramatic retelling would circulate officially. Just a record in compliance archives and a strengthened set of safeguards. As evening approached, I reviewed Helix's rollout plan one more time, not obsessively, deliberately. Every file saved through the portal, every assumption documented, every collaboration logged transparently, not out of fear, out of clarity. The lesson wasn't about distrust. It was about structure, about building work in a way that protects itself without hostility. I shut down my computer and stood by the window one last time that week. The city below flickered with quiet persistence, cars threading through streets, lights blinking on in high-rises, people carrying invisible battles and small victories. A week ago, I had walked into a conference room unsure whether my work would survive the day. Now, I walked out knowing something more enduring than credit had shifted. Authority doesn't shout, it documents. And when the next big review comes, and it will, I won't rely on instinct alone. I'll rely on timestamps, the kind that don't need to raise their voice to be heard.